What's happening, everyone? My name is James Lynch, and this is the Fanatics View Hockey Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you guys have any questions, post them in the chat. We'll get to every single one of them we can on this show. And I say we because a little bit later on the show, returning guest from last week, Troy Noak, going to be joining us a little bit later to talk about fantasy hockey strategy. But we did the Eastern Conference last week. Wanted to hit the Western Conference here today, give you my predictions for the season, and I'll sort of go through bit by bit, why I think certain teams are going to finish the way they are. It's going to be a fun little game of predicting things, so we'll get into that in a second. And like I said, Troy going to join us a little bit later here on the show to talk all things fantasy hockey, because I know Troy's got a really good strategy. Actually, Troy and I were in a draft last week together. I mentioned it here on the show, where you have to basically pick a player from every team. You have to pick 3 goalies. It's a long draft, takes about 2 hours. We got it just over, I think, 2 hours and 14 minutes. Really good stuff there, getting to do that with Troy. Couple things. Let's start first, before we get into my predictions, with everything that's going on the NHL docket from last night. Of course, there was a lot of stuff in the news that we can get to in a little bit. Just quickly looking at some games from last night. We had the Utah Hockey Club, still getting used to saying that. They should just go with the Yetis, if you ask me, beating the San Jose Sharks. You've got the Blue Jackets beating the Blues. You got the Golden Knights beating the Avalanche 6-1. And again, I always remind people when it comes to preseason, you can't really put much stock in there. Prime example, Friday night, the Canucks are playing the Edmonton Oilers. The Canucks didn't have JT Miller. They didn't have Elias Pettersson. They didn't have Quinn Hughes. They had Kevin Lankinen in net. And it's mainly a chance for guys like Jonathan Lekkerimäki and, other, names, Atu Ratu to get opportunities. Meanwhile, the Oilers dress, Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. So again, it's nice to have hockey back. Like I've said this before, I will way rather watch NHL preseason hockey than pretty much any other sport. I love hockey at all levels. Doesn't matter to me. But again, you can't put a ton of stock into that just because, again, certain teams have certain goals. Like with the Canucks, it was more about like showcasing, prospects. I think with the Oilers, they're more about getting some chemistry early on. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. And quickly on the Fanatics View side, my guy Taylor, hard at work. Lots of stuff from the Utah Hockey Club, Bill Armstrong and Chris Armstrong. Talking here. We've got some Nashville Predator availability, including Coach Andrew Burnett, Roman Yossi, and then more Utah stuff here. Sean Dursey. Lots of stuff here. And at Panthers, it's been a busy week here on Fanatics View, getting a lot of content up here. We've got the Canucks immediate availability, which was up a couple days ago, or 2 weeks ago, I should say. So yeah, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because that's one of the big perks of being on here is you get everything in one spot. Okay, let's get to the standings for this year. And last week, if you missed it, we did the Eastern Conference, Troy and I gave my predictions. Troy gave his. Troy's not going to participate in this today. I'm just going to do my version here today. So let's do the Western Conference, shall we? Okay, so at the top of the division from last year, we had the Dallas Stars in first place. I do see Dallas as a strong contender this year. They're pretty much the same team as last year. Didn't really add or gain much. Actually, let me just go quickly have a look at who they did get and didn't get. So they added Colin Blackwell, Matt Dumba. Dumba would be good. He's a veteran, good on the back end. Ilya Labushkin. And they added Casey DeSmith, who, it's debatable if he's an upgrade over Scott Wedgwood. I kind of put them in the same category. They're okay. I think they can get it done, but I don't see any reason why Dallas can't be at the top of the league this year. However, it pains me to say this because I'm not shy about, me not being a huge fan of the Edmonton Oilers. I think the Oilers are going to end up first. And you got to remember, too, with the Oilers last year, they ended up, having a really bad start, right? That ended up resulting in their coach being fired and Chris Knobloch being brought in. They're going to be better. I think the Oilers are a better team this year. They get Victor Arvidsson. They get Jeff Skinner. I think the goaltending still, it is what it is. They did lose Cody Ceci. I'm curious to see how that's going to have a ripple effect because he was playing a lot of big minutes. They've added Vasily Podkolzin, who I don't really think is going to be much of an impact, although it was interesting he was playing on the top line the other night. But I think the best bet here is the Oilers finishing first overall in the conference, in the Western Conference. I do think, like I said, they've leveled up a bit. I think Dallas is kind of the same team. And if we're looking at some of the additions for the Oilers, I did mention it there. Jeff Skinner. Who else did they get? Let me just look here. I want to make sure I got all the additions here right now. So they've added Victor Arvidsson and Jeff Skinner. They did lose Ryan McLeod, Warren Fogle, and Cody Ceci. They also were able to keep Adam Henrique. I think that was a good move from them as well. And Matthew Savoie was a nice trade name they added in there. So I don't see any reason why Edmonton can't be at the top of the division. So I'm going to go with Edmonton coming in first overall. We're getting some questions in here as well. Let's get to those too. Joe, you're always welcome here. Appreciate it. Let's go Preds. I'm excited for the upcoming season. Hopefully we can stay healthy and make a good cup run. I'm really interested with the Preds. Getting Marchessault, getting Stamkos. They did lose McDonough, so we'll see how that, fills out on the back end. But although they got Brady Shea, did they not? I think, we'll talk about Nashville in a sec. I think they're going to do well, but I'll tell you where I have them in a second. So again, I have Edmonton in the first spot. Okay, the second spot, I'm going with the Dallas Stars. I don't see any reason why Dallas would not be able to do what they did last year. Like I mentioned, when it comes to Dallas, I talked about some of the additions. Some of the subtractions for the Stars include Joe Pavelski, who's kind of on the tail end of his career. He's basically retired. I don't think there's any plans of him coming back. They lost Tanev, but you got to remember, these are regular season stats. Tanev wasn't part of the team most of the season. That was a trade deadline acquisition from Calgary. Ryan Suter they got rid of, and then Scott Wedgwood. So I pretty much kind of what I'm getting at is I see the same team as last year pretty much. Dallas is still a very good team, very well coached team. I'm a very big fan of Peter DeBoer and what he's able to bring to that club. So I don't see any reason why Dallas still can't be near the top of the league. And that's why I'm going to put them there in the number 2 spot. Okay, number 3. And you might be saying maybe there's a little bias here because of where I'm from and what team I support, but it's got to be the Canucks. I think they're going to finish similar to where they did last year. Now, with the Canucks, there's a couple schools of thought on their offseason. I heard Frank Saravalli do a hit the other day and talk about how, the Canucks are worse off as a team than they were at the end of last season, like in the playoffs. I mean, this was the team that took the Oilers to 7 games and they did quite well. But it's hard to say because I think, okay, so let's look at it from who they lost in the offseason. So they lose Elias Lindholm. You guys know me on here. I'm not a big Lindholm guy. I don't think he was that big of a factor for the Canucks. He was in the playoffs, but in the regular season, not so much. And he was going to play third line this year anyway, so not a huge deal there. They get rid of Ilya Mikheyev, who, let's be honest, since signing with the Canucks, just bad luck, right? I won't even say he played bad because I just think that it never got off onto the right foot. He had the groin injury. He had to play through the season. Mikheyev never really got his footing in Vancouver. They ship him off to Chicago. That won't be missed. Ian Cole is just a veteran presence. I think the guys that they brought in, which we'll talk about in a second, I don't think there's much difference there. And I think they will miss Zadorov to a certain extent. Although saying that, I mean, there were periods last year during the regular season where Zadorov was, in Tocchet's doghouse. Like, he wasn't playing well. He was only kind of like Lindholm. Like, he played much better in the playoffs. So, now, who do they add in here? They add a lot of nice pieces. Jake DeBrusk. I think that is a big upgrade over Ilya Mikheyev. And one of the big things that we've been hearing over the last couple of years for the Elias Pettersson defenders is that Pettersson's never had a good winger. And now he gets one in Jake DeBrusk. I mean, this is a guy that performed at a very high level in Boston. He's had a lot of good seasons. He had that one dip down year, but I think that was more of a coaching thing. Him and Bruce Cassidy didn't seem to get along. But I think DeBrusk is a very good complement to Elias Pettersson. So not only are you getting a better upgrade in DeBrusk on that wing over Ilya Mikheyev, but you're also potentially getting, leveling up Elias Pettersson as well, who I mean, let's be honest, Pettersson did not play well last season. And if he can come anything close to the glimpses of the player we've seen as someone who's very productive, that's another bonus. So again, I think up front, the Canucks are much better. You got Jake DeBrusk. They also got Danton Heinen, who was with Boston last year. He's another guy that shows flashes of, good things here. So I think Heinen's a guy that you could put on all types of lines. Kiefer Sherwood, I think, is an upgrade on your lower lines here. He's also a guy that there's been talk about maybe moving him up a little bit. So I don't think there's any question that despite losing Elias Lindholm, I think they're better up front. Now, the question mark is on defense. You lose Ian Cole, who's a veteran, but they bring in, Derek Forbort, who, veteran. Cole, Forbort, I don't think there's a huge difference there. Forbort's going to bring that size. They also brought in Vinny Desharnais from Edmonton to also add to some size as well. So I think there are some questions about the defense. And then there's obviously the worry that, hey, if like a Carson Soucy goes down again, like he was a few times last season, do you really want like a Derek Forbort or, Vinny Desharnais as your option? Probably not. So I have a feeling the Canucks are going to be on the hunt for a right shot defenseman if they can swing it. I know cap wise, they do have some issues right now, but anyways, long story short is, I think the Canucks are going to perform well. Obviously, the caveat here that I haven't even mentioned is the goaltending. Thatcher Demko still not starting for the Canucks. He has this sort of mystery injury that no one really knows the solution to at this point. And a lot of people are saying he's just got to play through it. So how will that affect his game? Are we going to see the same type of Vezina caliber goaltender? Tough to say, but I like the fact that they brought in Kevin Lankinen, who played quite well with Nashville. And if you look at the underlying numbers, this is a guy who's performed very well in his career, and I think will fit in there great. So you've got him. You've also got Arthur Seelovs, who played great in the playoffs last year, against Nashville, against Edmonton, did quite well. So I'm not worried about the Canucks goaltending, because even if Demko doesn't play for, a month or two, I think Lankinen and Seelovs gives you that insurance that you need in net. So no reason why I see Vancouver not ending up in the third spot here. I think they will perform quite well. Okay, the next team I see making a bit of a rise here is the Nashville Predators. Tango, you just mentioned it here in the chat. I think the additions of Stamkos and Marchessault really will give them that offensive punch that they need. That was something I think they were lacking in the Vancouver series. You just need more guys. They don't really have like a superstar other than Roman Josi, right? You add like a Stamkos in there, you add a Marchessault, that certainly makes things more interesting. So I do see Nashville making a bit of a rise here to that number 4 spot. Again, I'd have to look at the math and see how this all kind of goes out in terms of the division and all that. But I think as far as like overall points, I think Nashville will end up coming number 4. Let's quickly go over some of the additions. I did mention Stamkos and Marchessault. Just want to see if there's anyone else I'm missing. Brady Shea as well, and Scott Wedgwood will be a decent backup. I think him and Lankinen are kind of similar in that respect. So I have Nashville at number 4. Okay, number 5, I'm going to go with Colorado. So again, I have Colorado dipping down a little bit. Colorado was a bit of a quiet team in the offseason. They add in Calvin DeHaan, Eric Brandstrom, but they lose a lot of players here. Cogliano, Sean Walker, Jack Johnson. I mean, these are not like difference makers. We still don't know what's going on with Gabriel Landeskog. I just think for Colorado, ever since winning the Cup, they pretty much had a similar team. I mean, they made that trade last year, which we'll see if that ends up paying dividends, trading Bowen Byram for Casey Middlestat. I don't know if that's going to work out. I was very high on Bowen Byram, despite, some injury concerns, but I think that's one that might bite them. But I just see the same team as last year, and a team that I just don't see progressing that much from where they were, a season ago. So maybe they'll surprise again. Landeskog, if he comes back, that's obviously going to be a bit of a game changer for them. But right now the status is uncertain. So I do have Colorado coming in at the number 5 spot. Okay, number 6 spot. I know this is a bit of a drop here. The Winnipeg Jets. I said this before. We talked about this, on the show a few weeks ago. I mean, the Jets have just not done anything in the offseason. Like, I don't even know what they're doing at this point. Listen to all the key additions they lost in the offseason. Tyler Toffoli, Sean Monahan, Brendan Dillon, Nate Schmidt, Lawrence Brossoit. No like superstar names in there, but you lose offense like, Toffoli and Monahan. And granted, those were 2 guys that were acquired at the deadline, but like, what are you filling that up with? Like, to me, it's like, they're always going to be competitive because they've got Hellebuck, but I just don't see much of an improvement there. And I think Winnipeg, The Athletic had a great article a few weeks ago talking about teams that are stuck in the middle. I think Winnipeg's right there. So I have them coming in at number 6. Okay, number 7, I do have the Las Vegas Golden Knights. Again, similar thing. I don't think the Golden Knights had a very good offseason. If you look at who they ended up bringing in and losing, we'll talk about that. So they bring in Alexander Holtz from New Jersey, Victor Olofsson, and Ilya Samsonov in net. I'm not a Samsonov fan. I wasn't too happy with what he did in Toronto last year. And then you lose Jonathan Marchessault, Anthony Mantha. Again, Mantha was a trade deadline acquisition, so not a huge thing. But Marchessault, kind of the heartbeat of the team for a long time. Chandler Stevenson you'll miss. Logan Thompson in net. I think, Samsonov is not as good as Logan Thompson. I don't see much happen. Like, I could see a world where Vegas doesn't make the playoffs. Like, again, this season, if all goes well, they have a healthy Mark Stone. They have, you get a full season with Noah Hannafin, but I don't know. I'm not sold on Vegas. And, I know they won the Cup 2 years ago, but even in net, I'm not totally sold on Aiden Hill and their goaltending tandem right now. So it's going to be Hill and Samsonov. I don't know how that's going to work out. So I have them in at number 7. And then coming up to number 8, you got to go Los Angeles, but this is another team that really didn't do a whole lot in the offseason. They did get rid of Pierre-Luc Dubois, which, I think that was the right move. They would have been on the hook for a lot of salary for a while. So they end up bringing in Warren Fogle, Tanner Jeannot, Joel Edmondson, and Darcy Kemper. I'm not a big Darcy Kemper guy in the between the pipes. They lose Arvidsson, so they're going to lose some offense. They're going to lose Dubois. They lost Dubois as well. So those are 2 big factors in your offense. And a guy I think they're really going to miss on the back end is Matt Waugh. Matt Roy, I don't know how you say it. That's another guy that, because basically like Talbot and Kemper, I don't see much of a difference if we're being honest in the net. But losing Arvidsson, losing Dubois, that's going to be tough. So I just see the Kings as the same team as last year, and this is a team that continuously is just stuck in the middle. Like, they keep playing Edmonton in the playoffs and they keep losing. So I think the Kings might slide in there. But I could also see a world where they miss the playoffs as well too. So going with the Kings in the number 8 spot. Let's keep it going here. Coming in at number 9, I do see some improvement here from the Utah Hockey Club. I think they're going to come in at number 9. I like the additions of Sergachev, John Marino. They've got lots of cap space. I think they'll make some moves in the offseason, and their younger players are starting to come into their own. So I do see a bit of a jump this year. Connor Ingram can keep up the magic he had from last year. I don't see any reason why they can't go higher in the standings. I have them coming in at number 9. We'll go through the rest of this list, and then we'll get to your... we'll get to some questions right now. Brady is a slight upgrade over Ryan Mack. Could be wrong, but I think he's better, definitely younger. Well, he definitely is younger. I guess that's true. Yeah, I forgot about Brady Shea, to be honest. That was like a sneaky acquisition by Nashville. They absolutely could be a lot better. I'm doing well, Jay. Do you have any hockey-related questions? I'd love to hear from them. Okay, let's keep it going here. Coming in at number 10, I'm going to go St. Louis. They did get a couple good additions in that whole offer sheet situation with Edmonton. They get Dylan Holloway and they get Philip Broberg. Still have some questions about Broberg. Again, I want to remind people, Broberg was a guy they were looking to trade last year. He was not performing very well. So maybe a change of scenery will help him, but I have some questions about that. Dylan Holloway will be better. And then they add in Matthew Joseph, Alexandra Tessier, I don't know how you say that, and Radek Faska. Not much to like, though. This is the same team that missed the playoffs last year. You're bringing back pretty much the same team. I just don't see like a huge difference in this team, and so I think they could regress, well as teams like Utah could be a lot better. Again, this is going to be Utah this year because there's no Arizona Coyotes anymore. Okay, coming in at number 10, I'm going to go Minnesota Wild. Again, same deal. Wild, another team on this list that really did not do a whole lot in the offseason. You get Locko, you get Trennan. Didn't really lose guys either. They're just in cap hell because of this whole Suter buyout and the Parise buyout. They're going to be in a lot of tough spots going forward because they can't really improve things much. And I think they have some good players. Joel Eriksson-Ek, Kaprizov. These are all good players, but again, I don't see much of an improvement compared to some of their peers in the Western Conference. So I got Minnesota coming in at the number, I guess, pretty much the same spot as they came in. They're going to come in at 11. Okay, coming in at number 12, I'm going to go the Seattle Kraken. I do think they'll finish better than the Calgary Flames. Seattle's another team that I could be wrong about. They had a really bad season last year. Didn't make the playoffs. Of course, they were coming off a bit of a playoff run the year before. I think part of that was coaching. I think Dan Bylsma at the helm. I mean, this is a guy who's won a Stanley Cup with Pittsburgh. I see them having a bit of a coach's bump with that. And then you bring in guys like Chandler Stevenson and Brandon Martour, which will help. I don't think they're game changers, but I think it'll certainly help. And also, Matty Beniers is not going to be as bad as he was last year. I mean, he's definitely going to have a better season. So I think the Kraken will make some moves. I think they'll get up a little bit higher. So I do have the Kraken up a little bit higher on this list. And then kind of looking at this list as well, you see the Calgary Flames. They're rebuilding. No surprises there. They lose Mangiapane. They lose Markstrom. They bring in Anthony Mantha, which we'll see. I mean, I wasn't that impressed with him when Vegas acquired him. And then they get Jake Bean as well, who's a sneaky good pickup for them as well. But yeah, Calgary's a rebuilding team, not expecting much from them. And they're putting all their stock into Dustin Wolf between the pipes with Jacob Markstrom getting traded to New Jersey. Completing out this list, again, I mean, this could be shuffled any which way. We'll go with the Anaheim Ducks. Again, another team that has been rebuilding, but you got to think at some point they're going to take a bit of a step forward. They get Robbie Fabry. They get Brian Dumoulin. They lose Max Jones. Not much going on there. They do have cap space, though. Let me just look at the cap space for them. For Anaheim. And they got those good logos on their jerseys. I love the old school logo there. They got $20 million in cap space. So that could be an asset to them depending on how the season goes. Anaheim's another team that maybe could surprise. And then, battling it out for the bottom spot, I'll go Chicago over San Jose. Chicago's also a team that could maybe get a little bit higher than Anaheim. Chicago did, let's talk about some of the acquisitions the Hawks got in the offseason. They got a lot. They got Tyler Bertuzzi, Teravainen, Mikheyev, Pat Maroon, Alex Martinez, which I think was a sneaky good pickup for them from Vegas, TJ Brody and Lawrence Brossoit, although Brossoit is injured. And then they lose Taylor Radish, Tyler Johnson, Mackenzie Entwistle, and Nikita Zaitsev. You know what? Now that I think about it, I'm actually going to put Chicago ahead of Anaheim. They did improve a bit in the offseason. I think Brossoit is a great goaltender. But like I said, he's not doing so well right now, or he's injured right now, so that's going to be a bit tough. But yeah, Chicago's a team that could do better. And again, I think Bedard, second season for him, making some leaps and bounds, should do better. So again, I'm going to take back my pick. I'm going to put Anaheim below Chicago, Chicago ahead of Anaheim. And coming in last is still going to be San Jose. You know, a lot of promise with this team. We're excited, obviously, about the future of Macklin Celebrini, although last night he did take a bit of a tumble. I haven't heard an injury update on him. Hopefully it's not too serious. But if you look at them right now, they add Tyler Toffoli. That's a good boost. Barclay Goudreau, guy who's won a cup, a little bit of veteran presence. And Jake Wallman, I like that pickup too as well. They lose Barbaranov, they lose Zadina, they lose Mike Hoffman, and they lose Kyle Burrows. No major losses there. Again, I don't think San Jose, I mean, you got McKenzie, Blackwood, and Net. I just don't see any reason why they're going to be any better than last season. I mean, maybe we'll see. I mean, there could be a team that really tanks this year, but I think San Jose statistically was one of the worst teams in NHL history last year. And you look at the goal differential there, minus 150. Like, it's not even close. Like, look at this, minus 11 for a team that was about to make the playoffs, minus 150. Like, and they were what, 8-29? Sorry, 3-6-1. No, what was it here? What was the record I was looking for? Yeah, they were 8-29 on the road last season. I mean, winning 8 games on the road. Imagine you're traveling to go see San Jose, and chances are you're not going to see them win. So yeah, that's kind of how I've had this organized. So again, just to go over the order here, I got Edmonton in first, Dallas in second, I got Vancouver in third, Nashville in fourth, Colorado in fifth. I've got the Knights in sixth, I think I messed something up here. Jets in seventh, Kings in eighth, and then you heard the rest there. So hopefully I can remember that. I wish, I would love it if there was a website where you could actually like make the standings yourself. So I know visually this isn't great, but you've been listening along. You kind of know where I'm going with here. Again, I'm expecting a big. I'm expecting most of these teams that you saw in the playoffs last year to make the playoffs again. I think there's an off chance that maybe one of these teams in here makes it, like a crap. Like I could see Seattle. Yeah, maybe Seattle's the team that I'm looking at that could sneak in, and maybe Utah as well. But I think probably not likely. And again, if you missed my Eastern Conference predictions, did that last week on the show. Okay, let's get to your questions and we can get into some news as well. Broberg wanted out because he didn't have a spot for him in the lineup. Well, they also didn't. I mean, wasn't he also struggling a bit as well? Like, it wasn't like they had a reason to put him in. I mean, if you're a prospect and your team likes you, they're going to find a way to put you in the lineup, right? I think that was part of it too. Seattle isn't doing anything. I mean, they're definitely better than last year. And you got to admit, there's no way Matt Beniers plays as bad as he did last year. I mean, he'll be better this year. I think Joey Decord's coming into his own, and they still got Grubauer. I think they'll take a step forward this year, but we'll see. I don't know if that's playoff caliber or not. Flames were tanked for picks. When good, they have a new arena. That's true too. Ducks have nothing. Yes, love the old. Yeah, the old jerseys are so much better. So much better. Like with the orange, and you know what? Even bring back the purple. You guys remember the old purple jerseys? Let me find these right now. These are amazing. Paul Kariya. Yeah, this jersey. They got to bring this back at some point because I think they're going with like an orange color scheme. But look at that purple. And in fact, they should make the purple even brighter. They should do like a bright purple. Like look how beautiful that is. It's a great jersey right there. People say it's like too Disney or too gimmicky. I completely disagree. Great move by them. I loved, and I also love how the Coyotes went back to their old logo back last season when they had that too. Like, bring back some retro stuff. I think when you try and get too fancy, it doesn't appeal well to fans. Chicago should be better than Calgary. That's probably true. Yeah, you know what? I kind of forgot as I was doing this how many guys they got in the offseason. I would tend to agree as well. I think the Blackhawks will be a little bit better than Calgary as well. Although Calgary, I mean, listen, who did Calgary? Calgary won't have the goaltending. I mean, that's a big concern for them this year is Dustin Wolf and as opposed to Markstrom. So they're, you get and then you lose Tanev and Hanifin and all these guys late in the season. Zadorov, like, yeah, it's going to be interesting in Calgary this season. I think San Jose is better. Will Smith is going to win the Calder. We'll see. It's either him or the guy he's playing with. We'll have to see what happens. Keep the questions coming, everyone. Really appreciate it. Some other news that's going on in the league right now. Heard some chatter this morning on the radio when I was coming in about them possibly cutting back the preseason, which I'm totally fine with. I think the preseason does go on too long, and I'd rather see them add more regular season games. Like, it's September. Like, why can't, like, my kid who plays ice hockey started his season at the beginning of September. Why can't the NHL do that? I know the season, like, if I guess it's like a business thing, like money wise thing that they want to extend it as much as possible, but like, I prefer it to end a bit earlier than end as late as it does. I mean, last year, remember what they had the cup final and then all of a sudden it's the draft. Like, it's too much in between. Like, I think they'd be better off doing it that way. So Yeah, there's some talk of that. Of course, the CBA, my understanding is the CBA, they have to renegotiate it in 2026, but there's talk that they might meet in the new year. And one of the items on the table would be having shorter preseason and maybe more regular season. Because the NFL did this, right? They added an extra week. Yeah, and they lost Lindholm as well. Calgary did. Well, I mean, Lindholm, when that was the All-Star break, though. I mean, Calgary was pretty much out of it anyway, so I guess that's true. October 1st should be opening night. I completely agree. Yeah, they got too many games. And then look at all the injuries right now. Patrick Laine, we should mention that. He looks like he's out 2 to 3 months. Celebrini got injured last night. Drew Doughty might be out for the season. I don't even know how long he's going to be out. Get these guys in real playing time. Let's not, dicker, because there's some of these guys that look at that whole situation last night with Ottawa and in Montreal. I mean, the guy clearly was headhunting. Let me actually find that tweet from Frank Saravalli, who said that there's no discipline for, I can't even remember the player's name or how you pronounce it. Let me see here. No determination yet, but not expecting any supplemental. If you guys haven't seen it, by the way, go Google the hit. This was the hit right here. So they're showing it in slow motion. You can see here he clearly elbows Stützle. So no final determination yet, but not expecting any supplemental discipline for Arbor. Don't even know how you pronounce that, against Tim Stützle. So yeah, I mean, this is some of these guys. That's what they're trying to do to make a name for themselves, right? I just think even more reason to cut the preseason a bit short. If Drew is out for the season, LA doesn't make the playoffs. I would agree with that. Yeah, absolutely. I think he's that important to that team. I completely agree. It's weird with LA. Like, I remember back when the Canucks lost to the Kings in the playoffs all those years ago. And LA kind of went through a bit of a rebuild. Remember, they got rid of like Toffoli and they Martinez, and they got rid of like a lot of guys on their team, and it looked like they were kind of doing a rebuild, and it looked like it was kind of working. And then what happened? Like, it just all like evaporated. I think the Fiala thing really hurt them. I mean, that trade, Fiala's good, but you got it. Didn't Brock Faber go the other way in that trade? Yeah. Let me just look here. I want to double check. Where's the trade? Yeah, it was Fiala to the Kings for Brock Faber and a first-round pick. Yeah, I think they'd like that one back. Not that Fiala's bad or anything, but Brock Faber's pretty damn good. I think the Central Division takes the wild card spots for the playoffs. That could happen too. It's going to be an interesting season. I can't wait. Like this, I'm really, really amped for this season. A lot of movement. I love off-season movement. Like I like seeing players move around a bit and then seeing how teams can adjust with that and everything. So it's going to be interesting. Age really hurt LA. They won 2 cups in 3 years, and then guys got a little bit older, and they never really like addressed any issues. Like they never really here's like a prime example. They never really found someone to replace Jonathan Quick. Like even till this day, they're doing the Leafs thing where it's just they keep getting these veteran guys and hoping for the best. Although it's hard to draft good goaltenders. Like we've seen, high goaltending draft picks not pan out. So sometimes it's about finding the right pieces. I think the key thing for a lot of teams is finding these. I mean, the Canucks have been lucky as an example. I mean, Archer Seelovs was, I think, a 5th round pick. And he's like, could be the starter, soon here, if depending on what happens with Demko. Like, that's crazy. But yeah, I think, you see certain teams that, take on like projects or younger players, or Detroit's kind of running into that right now with their goaltending carousel. They've got to figure out which way they want to go with this. So it's going to be interesting there. With some other Canucks have had amazing luck with goalies. Well, it's funny, but that hasn't been that wasn't the case in the 90s. They had Kirk McLean on their cup run, and then after that, it was just a goalie graveyard. I mean, you go through all the goaltenders during Brian Burke's era, including Dan Cloutier, of course, letting in the goal from the blue line against Detroit. And yeah, basically since Luongo, they haven't had any goaltending issues. Think about this. It's gone from Luongo to Jacob Markstrom. No, Luongo to, I guess, Ryan Miller, then to Jacob Markstrom, then to Thatcher Demko, now to possibly Arthur Seelovs. Like, it doesn't get much, like, I can't think of a better, pipeline, really, if you think about it. Like, what other team has had a seam, other than maybe like Nashville, right? They had like Pekka Rinne, and now they have UC Saros. Like, they've been pretty good with goaltending. The Rangers had Lundqvist, and now they have, Sarukin. Shesterkin. Sorry, not Sorokin. Sorokin's an MMA fighter. Luongo and Schneider is a duel. That's true too. And then they traded Schneider for Bo Horvat, which then turned into, I mean, this is how crazy that this tree goes back. They traded Schneider for Bo Horvat. They trade Horvat to the Islanders for a pick and Atu Ratu. Ratu looks like he's panning out. And then you use that first round pick to get Filip Hronek. So they've continued to, benefit off that trade, which is just so far from what we've seen in the past from the Canucks. Usually it's them on the wrong side of a bad deal, Jared McCann for Eric Gabranson. Then you trade Gabranson to the Penguins for Tanner Pearson. Then you trade Tanner Pearson to the Canadiens for Casey DeSmith. Then you lose Casey DeSmith. That's how far that tree goes. You had Jared McCann, who's like one of Seattle's best players. Although saying that, a lot of teams gave up on Jared McCann. Florida, Toronto, I believe, had them at one point, right? As part of, Pittsburgh, Toronto, and now Seattle. So sometimes it just takes a little bit. Is JT Miller hurt? Yes, he is. I talked about it yesterday. Let me find the statement yesterday. I will read it right here. What does he say here? Here we go. Canucks, which by the way, if you guys want to follow the Canucks Insider Twitter account, very good for information. I've just been trying to take care of something and not forcing it, which I'm fine with. Why risk anything in the preseason? Take whatever precautions you need. Like Miller knows how to play hockey. He doesn't need to get practice. I think it's totally fine, I'm fine with that. Again, preseason, doesn't matter. Let's look at the, actually, now that you remind me, I want to see what Daily Faceoff has for the Canucks lineup, because it's going to be interesting to see who they go with this season. So they have Danton Heinen on the first line. I don't think that's the plan. And they also have Lekramaki, I should say, on here. He got sent down to Abbotsford AHL yesterday, so he's off here. So I think Niels Holglander will be possibly on the first line or on the second line. And then either Sprong or Heinen up here. I think they're going to keep Sherwood on the fourth line. And then eventually when Dakota Joshua comes back, he will be with Bluger and Garland. So yeah, they'll have to move some stuff around. But I think Atu Ratu could be a fourth line guy. Maybe you move Peace Suter to the third line or the second line even. We'll have to see what they do. Canucks dealing with a few injuries there. Sprong will be top two lines. Yeah, I mean, he's really good. I've been impressed with him. And they got him on like a cheap deal too. What was his cap hit? I think it's like 800 and it's like less than $1 million, I think. Really, really cheap. Full roster breakdown. Daniel Sprong. $975K. Thank you very much for a guy who might end up getting like 40 points this season. That's crazy. So, also we're getting an update here. Suter is not on the ice for the Canucks, so is he banged up? And Miller is on the ice, so we'll have to see. Yeah, anyways, that's kind of interesting. Dakota Joshua's still injured, but this is the nice thing about the Canucks this season is that they have a lot of depth, so there's no concerns about like a guy like Ratu, who's been playing really well in the preseason. Like he might end up on the opening night roster just with the injuries they've been dealing with. But they got a lot of depth. Even a guy like Sammy Bias or Sammy Bays, they have him in the system in Abbotsford, but they could bring him up if they want. I think you'd have to go through waivers though. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens there. Great pickup. Is Shilov's the goalie? Who is the backup? If Shilov's is the goalie, who's the backup? Kevin Lankinen. So here's the thing. They signed Lankinen to the 1-year contract. Again, $875K at absolute steal. Kevin Lankinen got $2 million last season from Nashville to be a backup. So there's no reason to rush back Demko. If I'm the Canucks, like take as much time as you need. Let's not rush. Like no need to rush him back. So if you go with Seelovs and Lankinen, I think that's fine. Lankinen played fine last season. Seelovs, he's got to work on that point shot though. I saw he let in a few during the preseason from there. But I would like to, I think you balance the games between Lankinen and Seelovs, and I'd be fine with that. Like I'm not too concerned with that tandem. And then you've got Yuri Patera in Abbotsford with Tolopilo as the other goalie there as well. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, if Demko comes back, I saw, I'm not going to mention the journalist, but there was a guy yesterday being like, Lankinen could go on waivers when Demko comes back, or they could just have Lankinen as the backup. Like, I would almost think it's in the Canucks' interest to just carry, like to put, I know Seelovs wants to get NHL games, but like, I think it would be better if Seelovs just gets sent to the minors when Demko comes back and just go with Lankinen and Demko. Because what if, like, I'm sorry, but Demko's a liability at this point, unfortunately. And I do think, like, you know, if you put Lankinen on waivers, someone is going to pick him up, and then you've got Seelovs and Demko, and then what if something happens to Demko again? Then you just got Seelovs on his own. Like, this is the thing. Like, as great as Seelovs played in the playoffs last year, you still need to ease him into this. He's only 23 years old, so you don't want another, you know, situation where like a Devin Levi in Buffalo, for example, where it's like, okay, too much too soon. So that's kind of where we're at there. Let's look at some other news in the league. Still waiting for our buddy Troy to get on here. Again, he'll probably come on with about 15 minutes left in the stream, guys. So I'll let him do all the talking when we're doing that. Let's look at some other news here in the league. Have you guys set your fantasy hockey lineups yet? I might actually, I'll see if, I might even see if you guys would be interested in a hockey pool as well, you viewers of the show. You guys would be interested in that. Dude, how did I completely forget about this? Jeremy Swayman. We got to talk about this. Okay, so for those that missed it, Cam Neely, general manager of the, or not general manager, president of the Boston Bruins. Let me show you a screen grab here. So, anyways, I can't show you a visual because I can't find an article that does it. So in this middle of this press conference, Cam Neely blurts out, Jeremy Swayman has $64 million reasons to be with the Bruins, basically is what he says. So he's basically revealing the contract, which if you're doing the math there, that's $8 million a season. Immediately, Swayman's agent comes out and says, hey, we've never heard this offer. We hope to work with the team. But I mean, this is like, I don't get this. First off, as someone who, again, has been a Canucks fan for a long time, to see the Bruins go through a bit of turmoil is fine with me. But could they have played this any worse? First and foremost, even before we talk about the fact that Cam Neely blurts out the contract offer out there, we got to talk about the fact that they traded Linus Ullmark without having Swayman done. Like, why would you do that? Like, maybe you had an offer, and they didn't even do well in that trade. Like, that was a trade that I thought Ottawa did quite well in. I just don't see, like, was it because they had to move cap space? I don't really know when was that trade even happening? Let me find out. I just don't get why they opted to trade Ullmark first, and like they must have just assumed that the Swayman thing was going to be a big deal. Anyways, either way, we're sort of at this point where, it was on June 24th. He was traded to Ottawa. Okay, so yeah, they probably did need to trade him a bit. What was his cap hit? There's probably a cap thing too that they had to trade him. But anyways, they trade him in June to Ottawa. Why don't you figure out, like, you got to get the other guy signed? Like, to me, that was just a big blunder. It's like the Canucks, like how they dealt with, they got Hronek signed before they hit free agency because you need that cap space to figure things out. Same with Pettersson. That's why they kind of forced Pettersson's hand last year, saying, look, dude, you got to sign or we might trade you to Carolina. We'll see. We don't mind, throwing you out there. So yeah, that's the first thing. Why on earth did they not sign Swayman before they traded Ullmark? So now you're in the situation where they're not close on terms. I'm just seeing right now Daily Faceoff reporting this a day ago saying the offer to Swayman was 7.8. So they must be close because Neely blurts out that it was going to be $8 million. And, I kind of see it from both sides. Like I see it more from the Bruins side. It's like, this guy hasn't played a lot of games. Like he's shown glimpses of him being, capable. But, like, are you going to commit $8 million to a guy who really hasn't played that much? Like, how many games has he played so far for the Bruins? And it was sort of a surprise that he ended up sort of thriving through here. So he plays 44 games last year, has a good season, and you're going to commit $8 million. Mind you, other teams have done this. Who did this? Dylan Gauthier with Utah. They sort of bet on him. There's a few other players I know they've done this with recently. But with goaltending, it's such an important position. And what you don't want to have happen is what's happened with Florida. And it's lucky that Florida kind of figured it out. But with Bobrovsky, right? Like that contract looked terrible prior to, like, at the time it was like, okay, like this is a guy that, we're going to commit a lot of term to, but then it almost bit them in the butt too. Luckily they were able to get out of it, but you just look at, like, teams that commit a lot of salary to goaltending. It's like, I don't know. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds. I'm kind of at the point where, and you guys let me know in the chat, like, I think this is a damaged relationship. Like, if you're Swayman, like, how do you go play for a team that publicly outed your negotiations? Like, if the agent did that, that would be different, and that you still shouldn't do that. But, like, I'm pretty surprised that, like, Neely just blurted that out. I just don't see the advantage in doing that other than putting more public pressure on Swayman, but then you're not going to win people over that way. So I don't know. I don't know how this is going to unfold. You hope that they can come to an agreement, but man, it's gotten pretty ugly in Boston for one of their most important positions. And I'll say this, like, if Swayman gets traded, like, first off, like, you're not going to win that deal. Like, I don't think I saw Sportsnet come up with a few, options for Swayman, like Chicago and teams that have cap space. But like, you're not going to win that deal. And if you don't have Swayman in net and you're going with Korpisalo, you're not making the playoffs. I mean, you might make the playoffs, but you're not even close to a cup contender at that point, because Swayman's a big reason why Boston had so much success. So I think the whole thing's really bizarre. But like I said, just as someone who, is still a little bitter from 2011, it's not the worst thing in the world. Do you think Nashville gets way better, or is it the new Ottawa Senators, a team that looks stacked on paper but broken up by the playoffs? I think they'll be better. I could see them potentially going past the first round, but I still don't think they have they get Stamkos, but we're just gonna we got Troy on the line here, so we'll get to him in a second. Just to answer this question quickly, I think Nashville will be better, but I still think they're lacking like a superstar on the team. Like Stamkos, yes, was a superstar. I think now not so much. I think they'll do better than last season. I don't see them as a cup contender. I know, they got the goaltending and all this other stuff, but we'll have to see what happens. All right, we got our returning guest here. He's becoming a regular on the show, Troy Noak. Troy, how you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you? Just hopped out of class. Really looking forward to chatting some fantasy hockey, because I know a lot of people have drafts coming up this week. And with all these injuries and stuff, obviously, some of these players in drafts are going to be sliding up and down the rankings very quickly.
Yes, so happy to have you on here. We got about 15 minutes left, but I think that's a good amount of time to go through everything. I've covered all the news and covered all the standings and stuff. I'll just let you take it away with some of the things you want to talk about with your strategy when it comes to hockey, and just you have a grid as well that you were sort of telling me about too. Anything you want to kind of just share off the top about what we're going to talk about here as far as the fantasy hockey stuff?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, you definitely need to know your league scoring settings, because in my home league, for instance, I'm in a bangers league where hits, blocks, shots, and everything, they're worth a little bit more as opposed to the league we're in together, whereas it's basically goals, assists, goalies, wins, and losses, and it's totally different. So hence, like in some leagues, some players are worth a lot more than others. Like, for instance, Brady Tkachuk brings a ton of value in my league, who's a perennial first-round pick, whereas in an average points league, he's nowhere near close to being taken in the first round. And I think one thing that a lot of people mess up on when they're drafting is kind of just people prioritize going with positions too much. And realistically, you have to break players down into tiers. And the first 5 or 6 rounds, you really have to go with people that are certain, nailed on, getting somewhere around 20 plus minutes a night and on the top power play unit. Because if you're starting to take guys that aren't guaranteed in those first 5 spots, it's really going to cause you problems down the road. And here's another example that I like to use. So in my league, I'm in a bangers league. And for those who are in a standard categories league or a bangers league, I think this is a good tip for you guys. So Cale Makar, everyone knows more or less he's the best defenseman in the NHL. And he's basically the best defenseman in fantasy every year. Maybe 1 or 2 years he's in the top 3, top 5. But in terms of points per game, he's always a top guy. But in a bangers league, for instance, he gets about 5.0 points per game. That doesn't even come near the production of a Forsberg or a McKinnon or a Brady Tkachuk. And there's really no reason, if you're in about an 8 to 10 team league, that you should be taking Cale Makar in the first round of a bangers league, although he is one of the best in his position. But there's completely different tiers of production. And I don't think at certain points, yes, a player is good, but they have to outperform their average draft position. And I think another group of players that people like to ignore are middle to lower level teams' best players, that they often provide better value than, say, the 3rd or 4th best option on one of the best teams in the league. So I'm just going to start rattling off some names like wildfire that I think are going to outperform their ADP. And yes, outperforming your ADP, you could even be someone like that in the first round, like Kirill Kaprizov, who more or less scores at a 1.2 point per game rate. And I think a person similarly to him that could have an enormous breakout season is Matt Boldy, who year after year has shown consistent flashes of just being a solid fantasy hockey asset. But once he's deployed more at even strength with a high-end player like Kaprizov, I think he could make a massive splash in the fantasy hockey community. On top of that, another player that I really love is JJ Peterka on the Buffalo Sabres. We saw at the tail end of last season, this guy's shot on goal prop was hovering between 2.5 and 3.5. He was shooting like crazy, going on the top line, even strength, top power play. The Buffalo Sabres went over to Munich to play the other day, and he's obviously a German player, and it was a great experience for him, and he lit it absolutely on fire. He's someone that you could find in the mid to late rounds of a draft. That's a total steal. And like I said, when you're drafting players, you want to find guys that are getting 20 plus minutes a night and the top power play. And although the Buffalo Sabres to many aren't the most appealing team at face value, if you're playing with Tage Thompson at even strength on the power play, you're going to get your fair share of point exposure. If there's any questions in the chat, please feel free to let me know. But I have a ton of players here. Another one, Zach Werenski. He was scoring at the second half of the season at a 0.9 point per game pace. And I think I've noticed over the past few years, a popular trend in fantasy hockey is hot second half finishers of the season before tend to carry it over into the beginning of next season. Players like Dylan Larkin, Zach Werenski, players that are going to the IIHF championships who did not make the playoffs. They're prolonging their season. They're staying in shape. They're staying on top of it. They're fully training. They're never taking time off. Those are other players that I like to target. Jack Hughes coming off of his surgery, consistently practicing at the USNDP. Another player that I think is a huge fantasy hockey home run is Kevin Fiala. Arvidsson leaving opens up a spot in the top power play unit where Kevin Fiala was more or less on it, but he wasn't always the primary trigger man, even though Adrian Kempe is most of the time. But Victor Arvidsson is a fantastic power play player, and a wing spot just opened up for Kevin Fiala, who him and PLD were misfits playing on the third line very frequently last year. And like I often say, there were too many high-end players playing in the bottom six of that team with the LA Kings. And now I think Kevin Fiala, a consistent rate shooter, a player that was really hot at the second half of last season, is going to provide huge value in fantasy hockey moving forward. Another guy, Brian Rust, a player with a 2.5 to 3.5 shots on goal line consistently, playing at even strength in the power play with Sidney Crosby on a struggling Penguins team. And yes, struggling teams really often rely on their top players to carry the workload, and that's why I think Brian Rust in the middle rounds is an absolute home run. The New York Islanders, Patrick Waugh, often goes to his top line. Their minutes were consistently 20-plus a night since he became the coach. Bo Horvat is a player that I love. A player that I would most likely want to stay away from right now is Brock Nelson, who's seemingly lost his power play duties. And although he's a great producer at even strength, if he's losing those extra 2.5, 3 minutes of time on ice, this is a player that I really want to pass on, because in years past, this was one of the ADP outperformers I always look for. And this year, he's the complete opposite. Another player that I think provides massive value in fantasy hockey is Mikhail Sergachev, because although he's coming off a huge injury, he's going to be most likely taking over the reins of Power Play 1 at the Utah Hockey Club, which is honestly littered with talent. And we've seen year over year in Banger League formats that Sergachev blocks shots, throws the body around. And 2 seasons ago, he was on Power Play 1 over Victor Hedman and had a lot of fantasy owners frustrated that drafted Victor Hedman early. Another one, Gabriel Velarde, net front guy on the Winnipeg Jets. Kyle Connor, I think, is another guy who could easily outperform his ADP. Yes, everyone knows Kyle Connor's name, but he is a player that's relatively underperformed in fantasy last year, and I think he's slipping a little bit too low in the ADP. Those are 2 players that I really like a lot. Owen Tippett, this is a player that I had in fantasy hockey last year, a crazy rate shooter, 3.5 shots on goal guy. He's going to be the primary focus of this offense. He's the fastest player on the team. He's got the best shot. He's glowing with confidence. When the Florida Panthers traded him to the Flyers for Claude Giroux, it didn't really work out for the Panthers in the long run of that trade, but the Philadelphia Flyers got one of the best players in the league blooming, and I wouldn't be shocked if he put up a 40-goal season this year, but I wouldn't be entirely certain that the Flyers will be a fantastic team. Another guy that I think is going to easily outperform his ADP, which is shocking me, I can't believe this guy's going so late in drafts, is Jack Eichel. 3.5 shot on goal guy. The Vegas Golden Knights, they've lost a little bit of talent with Jonathan Marchessault, so they're going to lean on him a little bit more to be the big offensive producer. And ultimately, I know they're one catastrophic injury away of things going completely haywire, but this is a situation that I consistently love to attack in fantasy hockey. Is a middle level team with a superstar that's playing 20 plus a night. That's a big rate shooter. And Jack Eichel, in my opinion, he's going too late. Noah Hannafin, I also think in Banger League's formats, he blocks, he hits, he does things very well. And if he, as slated, is taking over power play one like we believe, he's going to massively outperform his ADP. This is a player that I've been drafting basically everywhere as I can, and especially if you're playing best puck. I think for value, this might be one of the best picks you could get in the draft.
I'll interrupt you here because, by the way, you've been doing a great job, and this is so valuable. I'm going to be sending all my friends. Actually, I probably shouldn't send my friends because then they'll have an advantage over me if we're doing any drafts, but certainly a lot of valuable information. But a couple of things you touched on there that I wanted to just chime in as you're kind of finding your other list here. Hits is another thing in certain leagues that is something that I think people don't look at. A lot of leagues do value it. A guy like Dakota Joshua for Vancouver was a league leader last year in hits and was also scoring at a good pace. So if you have a league where they're counting hits and you also have goals and assists, that's something to keep in mind as well. Find those offensive guys. They're the guys that have some offense, but also lay some hits. Zadorov's another name in Boston that could do sort of both, score and also lay some hits there too. A couple other names I'll just mention who I think could surprise this season because people forget sort of the circumstances. Max Pacioretty in Toronto. When he actually played, if you look at the data, he's actually performed quite well. In Toronto, I imagine he's going to get some type of role. I mean, this isn't the old Max Pacioretty of Vegas or Montreal, but if you get a late pick on a Toronto team that you're not really sure what's going on, I think he's a guy that could surprise. Another name that I took in our draft, and I'm hoping for some better production here, I think Ilya Mikheyev for Chicago is an interesting one. This is a guy who, when healthy, one of the fastest guys out there. He's just got to get the scoring touch. I think there was too much pressure on him in Vancouver, and I think in Chicago will be a little bit more free in terms of moving up and down the lineup. If he ends up getting on one of those top lines like they tried in Vancouver with Pettersson, I could see some offensive production for him as well. So I think one of the key things is, especially if you're drafting late, is to find those names where maybe they didn't have, like, the overall numbers aren't great, but you got to look a little bit closer and see, okay, how are they performing and what situation were they in? And I think that's a key thing as well if you're drafting a bit later, I should say.
Yeah, and another thing is, don't be afraid to draft players that are currently injured, in contract dispute, or suspended. For instance, I'm looking at my list right here. Valeri Nichushkin, there's a lot of question marks around him. Most likely he's going to go back to the Avalanche. There's a potential he get traded, but I highly doubt it. This is a guy in Banger League's formats that if there weren't any question marks around his name and we knew for certain he was on PK1, PP1, and playing on the Colorado Avalanche on the wing of Nathan McKinnon, in Banger Leagues, he's going in the first 4 rounds. He's a Timo Meier-esque player in Banger Leagues or category formats, Nichushkin. And I think, yet again, don't be afraid to draft him because it's not like he's injured or anything. He has to just serve his 6-month sentence for the things that he did in the playoffs. And another player that I think that you can get a lot of value on drafting is Brad Marchand right here, because we heard later after the playoffs, he didn't use it as an excuse right after the Bruins got eliminated, but he had 3 off-season surgeries. And this is another guy that I've drafted year over year while he was injured / questionable, and he's provided me massive value down the road. Another player that I find extremely intriguing in fantasy hockey this year, because I just heard this tidbit recently, and this just has me... I've always liked this player. I've had a soft spot for this player, and when it hasn't worked out for him the past couple of years, it always left me slightly confused, and that's Anthony Mantha. Apparently, a front office member challenged him to have over 200 shots on goal this season, and in any fantasy hockey league format, that's a great thing. And if he's playing with Jonathan Huberdeau, who's primarily a pass-first player, and they're urging him to shoot, this guy's 6'4", 6'5", big body winger. I mean, I'm not saying spend early draft capital on this guy. Maybe throw the last pick. Maybe he goes undrafted in your league, most likely, but keep an eye out for him. Another one I would say is Dmitry Voronkov. In the preseason this year, Dean Evison has this guy hitting everyone. He's getting about 2 to 3 shots on goal a game, and he's the net front guy in the power play. And one thing I've noticed with the Columbus Blue Jackets since being under Dean Evison is the puck moves a lot faster, and there were a lot of plays yesterday against the St. Louis Blues when there was more or less full lineup versus full lineup where the Blue Jackets won, that Voronkov was posted up in front of the goal on the power play, And instead of taking it to the net, he would one touch pass it right back out to keep the puck moving on a cycle. And they actually scored off that. Fantilli passed to him down low, one pass right back and across to Chinikov for a goal. So this is a guy that in Banger League and category formats is 100% going to go undrafted unless you're in like a 16-team league or an extremely sharp league. This is a guy that'll produce similar to an Ivan Barbashev, a Lawson Krause, a Philip Deneau type guy, at least someone that's worth a weekly stream on the waiver wire, if not rosterable.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in there in terms of, different picks and stuff. And that's sort of the key thing. And I think you said it off the top. Really make sure you know your league and the settings and really go in and make sure you get plenty of notice. Like one of the things we did in our draft was I let you guys know a little bit in advance where you'd be drafting so you'd have a better idea of and some drafts don't do that. Sometimes you just have to find out the day of. But any little bit of information you can get ahead of time, especially if you're paying money for a draft, make sure you get it ahead of time. And then, like I said, go and find those resources where you're able to get certain information and have those players, like even on teams that you're not familiar with, have a couple players that could surprise. Because we even had it in our draft. I'm not going to mention the guy's name, but he even forgot certain players were traded or not on that team, and that's that extra second that you're wasting to figure out who's on the team is time you could be investing into players that can actually benefit your team. So that's something to keep in mind. We're almost out of time here, but just quickly, I wanted to get this question here from Lamar. He says, what do you think about Colorado Avalanche for the Stanley Cup?
Well, I personally believe that they're an interesting buy low opportunity if you're looking at them from a betting market because, like I said, there's a lot of question marks around Nichushkin. Lehkonen is injured to start the season, and those are two guys that they consistently play on the power play and the penalty kill for them. Those are big-time players for them, although they aren't the biggest names because they obviously get overshadowed by the McKinnon, Rantanen, and Cale Makar, who are the superstars of that team. But realistically, those are the players that make everything work and bring everything together on that team. And with that being said, if all of those players come back healthy and there's no question marks around Nichushkin's return, I think they're easily going to be one of the best teams in the Western Conference because they skate hard and they hit. And we've seen time over time at 5-on-5, if your feet are moving fast, you're drawing penalties and you're getting shots. So I think the Colorado Avalanche, if nothing happened this past playoff run with Nichushkin, I think we'd be talking about them completely differently.
Yeah, it's going to be something to watch for sure. That's one of the intriguing teams in the Western Conference. Troy, I wish we had more time, but I got to hop out of here. We'll definitely have you back here. We always love having you here on the show and always appreciate you making time. Just anything you have coming up here that you want to let our audience know, I will give you the floor here, sir.
Nope, that'll be it. Thank you so much for having me on, James, and have a good one, guys. Good luck in your drafts.
And quickly, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. We'll be back next week. Start of the regular season, I think, will be underway, yes, because the season starts this Friday. So we'll have a lot to talk about. We'll definitely get Troy back on here in a little bit. We'll see how the Jackets do early in the season. They got that cap exemption. I just noticed that before he hopped over here. Hope you guys have a great rest of your Wednesday. We will see you next week, or I will see you next week. And take care, guys. Have a good one.